Okay. When we discuss the Fey rune, or any rune, the superficial meanings are just a starting point. There's a lot of different varying meanings, things you never think of, but most people never get to that point. Most people don't investigate beyond what they read in books. They don't look for themselves. And that's useless. Because if you do not take the search into your own hands, get your own experiences, not the experiences the writers tell you, but the experiences you get for yourself, then it's really an exercise in just superficial. You will never get great results. So you have to delve into this further. And there's certain ways to do this. Of course, I've discussed them, written them in my books. There's no need to cover them now. What we're going to be doing in the next 24 sessions is we're going to look at an aspect of the runes that either people don't look at, or we're going to look at it in a way that current rune craft, the rune crafters really don't look into. And one of the things about Fey, and I speak of this often, is the idea of substance, the idea of an underlying prima materia, primal matter, an undifferentiated something that adds value, that adds worth. Just as in things in the physical world have an astral counterpart. The wealth that we have, it's astral, the astral aspect of it is substance, prima materia. And the metaphysicians of old, when they first started translating the Greeks, came up with the term substance. And the pagan Greek philosophers had a good understanding of it. You know, and it's a great thing for us, because of all the pagans out there, the ones that are most well documented and are closest to us would be the Greeks and the Romans. The Greeks worked this out pretty well. They didn't call it Fey, they called it substance. Modern metaphysicians have worked with the concept. And it's really a very basic thing to think. The nature of substance is, it's a value that you accumulate. You accumulate the spiritual value, and it should be able to manifest in the physical value, but it's a material also that if you work with. Now, one of my favorite stunts, and I've been doing this for too many years, the dollar bill. You know, some of you recently saw me use this, and this is a piece of paper. The value of it is, maybe they say it costs 1.5 cents to make or something like that. Useless. And yet it's a dollar. It's a far more valuable thing because it represents a certain amount of value, a certain essence that we can trade, that the way we value things. And this value is money. And it's also substance. So a dollar, as you know, is a dollar to whoever holds it. The rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief, white man, black man, Indian chief, you know, whoever has it, it's a dollar. It doesn't change this value. And here we get into the idea of substance. But money isn't the only thing. Let's take cattle again. As I said, in Scandinavia and Germany, in fact, in Scandinavia, until fairly recently, many homes still had the milk cow. I remember my father-in-law talking about it, going back there, and some people in the 60s still had the milk cow, which would live in a room that was like off the house. Sometimes there would be a Dutch door between where the cow was and the house. You know, it was an animal that was protected and fussed over because it was a major resource. It was your Fey. It produced Fey. And in a very real sense, things like cheese, butter, buttermilk, and stuff like that were invented so that this leftover milk could be preserved. And in that form, it could also be traded in the ancient world. You could bring a bucket of milk to town, but you know, that was going to spoil soon enough. But if you made it butter or cheese, it was something you could trade on the market then. Something you could store for your own use, and you got the value of it. See? milk is a commodity, and if we look even to this day, milk is a form of fey. I'm going to go back to the 50s when they had a thing called the milk run. I got the cat going after my leg. There's nothing better to do. The milk run, where these were local trains. A local train made every stop, an express train made only every few stops. And the local trains, passenger trains in the old days that were heading toward the city would have extra cars on them. So there would be the passenger cars, there would be what were called express box cars, which would pick up small freight and packages. It was the equivalent of UPS and FedEx in those days, and it was usually run by a company called REA, our Railway Express Agency. We'll get into that with radar. But also there would be these refrigerated milk carts, and they would pick up milk from the farms along the way and bring this into the city. And this went on every day, and the milk cars would be empty, they would be cleaned, they would be steam cleaned, and the milk would be off the market. And they'd go to the dairies, and some would be bottled, some would be sold as milk. But other milk would be sold as cheese, it would be turned into butter, it would be turned into milk sugar, it would be turned into an ingredient for, say, some prepared foods, all from this commodity, and it had a value as much as money. If this wasn't a currency of its own, why go through this expense? And they went to great expense. It was a commodity. So we think of the milk as pure substance. That really doesn't do anything. It's just value until you get it to the dairy where it can be prepared and sold to make you a profit. It's a fascinating thing in itself. The milk runs are really no longer done like that. The railroads stopped doing them years ago. Dairies use refrigerated trucks now, refrigerated tank trucks. The whole industry has changed, but just think of all these trains coming into the city, and we're talking like 50 or 60 trains a day bringing milk into the cities, and more in New York City. You know, we're thinking Hoboken and places in Jersey. There was a lot of it. Another commodity is, of course, the eggs and chickens, and I remember years ago, in a town called Westbrookville, New York, there was a chicken, basically a broker. This guy bought all the eggs from the farms. His name was Phil, and he was bald and his head looked like an egg. And these eggs would all be shipped to the city, and they would be sorted by size, because size had something to do with value. Keep that in mind, size and amount. The color had something to do with value, and some would be sent to be sold as eggs in the supermarket, but some would be sold as eggs to be used to prepared for a food ingredient, prepared food, different things you could buy that were made of eggs. So again, it's the idea of fey, only this comes from the chicken. But it's all this substance, and if you're a coal miner, coal is your fey. If you doing a wheat farming, the grain is your fey. But these are all examples of this principle. Fey, it has to be tended. There's an old joke that you have to build a fence around it, you have to control it. Just like the cow, it'll wander off. And if fey is not controlled, if you just leave it there, it dissipates, it meanders off, you lose it, it fades away. So fey has to be managed. This is why with money we have banks. This is why with farms we have fences. With wheat farms we have silos. We have to contain and control it. And it does nothing. We have to control it. Some forms of fey have a time limit. Grain can go bad. Milk can go bad. It depends on one thing or another. So there's a way in which we can make it benefit us, but we have to take action. The motion of fey by itself is just to meander and dissipate. So there has to be the will, the mind. If you go down the first futon, right, you see fey. You see hagal, which is stuff scattered. There's your two opposites. There's fey. Here it's scattered. With tir, the mind is marshalling it. The mind is marshalling it. So, that's something to think about. Again, Fe, substance, prime materia that's differentiated. Money is such a strange commodity, and even that has to be managed and marshaled. And like all things in life, nothing's perfect. We see in the recent economic crisis that, yeah, money is fake and gets scattered to the winds if it's not used carefully, if something accidental comes into the mix. And like all spiritual things, there's a truth to this. Fae will bring the truth at some point if it's stretched too far. And this economic upset was truth coming out. That these inflated values were not true values, and when the true value come up, everybody found out they were handling stardust. They weren't handling money. Remember the Enron scandal? That's really what kicked everything off. So, in a sense, Fae is truth, but again, it has to be managed and used. So, when you're thinking about this commodity, don't just think of cows and cattle. Think of other places. I've mentioned before the pet store even. The pets are livestock. They're not pets. They're to be sold. Okay? They produce money. So to the shop owner, there's no sentiment. Those puppies are just $50 each he's going to make off each one. Their profit, and he has to maintain that. The bank, it's maintained in a different way. The grocery maintains their products a different way again. Some has to be refrigerated, some has to be left out, some has to be stacked on shelves. And this helps you to understand that Fae is not some distant metaphysical concept, although that's in there too. But Fae is a very real thing we touch here. And if we look at the way we touch it here, it provides a gateway into which we can get to the deeper metaphysical meaning, because we go right through, you know. I'm trying to figure where to place my hands. I'm still new to the camera. Where Fae is the gateway through which we can get to it, rather than trying to jump up to this deep metaphysical concept and then work our way down and make it work in the practical world. So think of Fae as substance in its most primal form, undifferentiated substance. Astrophysicists think of Fae as helium and hydrogen, the building blocks of the universe. It's much to consider, and yet it's very simple. And folks, sometimes it's just as simple as a dollar bill. This is Uncle Thor from the Trollwise Press, and wishing you good luck in your studies. Our next lesson, we're going to be discussing the Rune, and I hope you'll stick around for that. Have a good one.